all the salvation, healing, deliverance, prosperity, it was provided for way back when Christ died on a cross for you. You know, see, because he not only took our punishment for sin, but he took upon himself the curse. This is, you know, Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law. See, because he says, you know, he was saying to abide in him. If I abide in you and you abide in me, you'll bear much fruit. Well, when Adam fell, we were severed. We were separated from him. And that's when corruption set in, and sickness, death, and disease was the result of that. You know, so Messiah came, defeated the devil, reestablished the dominion that Adam lost, and now we can live in him, he can abide in us, and we have been given the ministry of reconciliation, the restoration of all things, revival, the re-entry of that resurrection power in creation, restoring it back to the lush, fruitful state that it was in before, in the Garden of Eden before the fall. You know, so if you're bound, you know, if you're tormented in your mind, if you're suffering from addictions, you can be delivered from that. You can be set free from that. You know, see, a lot of people they don't accept Christ, or they don't, you know, they don't want to live for him because they think that being a Christian makes you bound from sin, but actually it makes you free from sin. You know, he says the truth will make you free. And see, you know, if your joy is full, you know, it says, don't be filled with wine, but be filled with the Spirit. You know, if your joy is full, you don't need those things. You have a happy, healthy, responsible, joyful, peaceful life that of prosperity and abundance, because now you're a profitable servant. You're a fruit-bearing creature in Messiah, because of your relationship with him, by abiding in him and him abiding in you. You know, he's the creator of all things. So if you have the creator living inside of you, you have enough power inside you to create galaxies. But we're not called to create galaxies, we're called to bear fruit. So we have the power, we have enough power to create galaxies, but we have enough faith to bear fruit, hopefully. But see, you know, fruit bearing, you know, every time something is created or procreated, you know, it functions according to the principle of seed time and harvest. You know, like the Godhead is the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Anytime something is created or procreated, there's a sower, a conceiver, and a seed. Christ was the Word made flesh, so he was the Word that came out of the Father, conceived of the Spirit, manifested in the flesh. You know, so he was the Word made flesh. He was the truth. He said, "I am the truth." You know, so whenever something is created or procreated, a seed is sown, that seed is conceived, and fruit is born. You know, and so all of creation is patterned after that creative principle. You know, you sow a seed, the ground conceives the seed, a tree grows, you know, it blossoms, it's pollinated, it bears fruit, you know. And see, any, you know, prosperity is the result of life. You know, if something is lacking life, it's sickly, it's, you know, it doesn't bear a lot of fruit. But if it's filled with life, you know, animals, you know, like you know, a healthy doe will can have like triplets, you know, where one that's not so healthy will have like one, you know. Or a tree, if it's sickly, it'll bear a little bit of fruit, but if it's filled with life, it'll abound with fruit, you know. It's the same with us. See, if we walk in Him, if we abide in Him and He abides in us, He says we'll bear much fruit. But what's He what type of fruit is He talking about? You know, well, the fruit of the Spirit is love and joy and peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. It's talking about various facets of love. It's talking about the Christ-like nature. See, the Word says that we are predestined to be conformed into the image of the Son. You know, so He was the firstborn among many brethren. So we, as sons of God, are supposed to become like Him. You become like Him in your spirit, man, when you are born again. But it says, don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. To be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. So because now we have the Spirit of truth, because we have His Spirit and power living inside of us, we overcome that sin nature by the Spirit living in us. It says in Galatians 5, it says, walk in the Spirit and you won't fulfill the lusts of the flesh. You know, so, you know, and that's another thing that you are free from. You don't no longer have to seek the things of this world for fulfillment. Because now, you know, you have the peace and the joy and the contentment. Paul said, whether I abound or whether I'm abased, I'm content. You know, there are times when we go through trials in this life where it doesn't seem like we're being blessed, but we have to have faith. This is let faith let patience have its perfect work in you. See, we have to have patience and faith working together. You know, Joseph had a dream that all of his brothers would bow before him one day. You know, well, the opposite occurred. His brothers sold him as a slave. You know, he was taken to Egypt. Then he was falsely accused of trying to rape his master's wife and thrown into prison. You know, he was 17 years old when he got the dream. He was 30 years old when he got delivered out of prison, brought before Pharaoh to interpret Pharaoh's dream. And you know, he had two dreams that both meant that, you know, he told Pharaoh there's going to be 7 years of bumper crop and 7 years of famine. So you need to stockpile grain during the 7 years of bumper crop, so you'll have it during the time of famine. You know, so you need to appoint somebody to gather up all of this grain during the times of plenty, so you'll have it when you need it. And he's like, well, being you're so smart, why don't you do it? So he made Joseph his right-hand man. Well, 2 years into the famine, his father said, I heard that there's grain in Egypt. So he'd sent the brothers to go buy grain from Joseph. They had to come and bow before him. They didn't even know who he was at first. He was kind of playing games with them a little bit, you know. But then he broke down and cried, and he says, man, I'm Joseph, you know. He forgave them. He said, you meant it for evil, but Yahweh meant it for good, you know. And so, you know, Joseph, he really portrayed the ability to walk in love, as he had to go through a long, hard, drawn-out, humbling process to prepare him for that position that he was predestined to, you know. And see, you know, because, you know, Yeshua, or Jesus, he said, whoever exalts himself will be humbled, whoever humbles himself will be exalted. So that, because there's a limit to how much we can humble ourselves. So we go through a trying time, we'll go through a humbling process to prepare us, you know, to that when we come into our promised land, when we come into our destiny, that we will be thankful and that we won't be revengeful. Because you can imagine how Joseph's brothers and Potiphar's wife felt when they found out that Joseph, the one that they betrayed, the one that they lied upon, the one that they stabbed in the back, turns out to be the one with all the power and authority and the wealth, you know. And but see, it took 22 years for Joseph's dream to come to pass. He was 17 years old when he got the dream. He was 30 years old when he went before Pharaoh, and here it was the second year of famine, so you're talking about another 9 years after that, you know. In 1987, in the woods in Kentucky, I came off a long, hard alcohol and drug binge, and I was in a state of desperation. Fortunately for me, both of my grandfathers and my uncle were all preachers, and I got born again when I was 4 years old. I received the baptism of the Holy Ghost when I was 14 years old, but I got off into the drug and alcohol party life, and so when I got to the end of my rope, I knew what to grab onto. And see, in that state of desperation, you know, this is, you know, it says, if anyone comes to Yahweh, they must believe that he is, or believe that he exists, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. You know, see, most people, they don't diligently seek him, but because they don't get to a point of desperation, you know. I mean, I was really desperate. I had like a $300 a day cocaine habit, and cops were after me, and people were after me. Lost everything, got drunk, crashed my last car, overdosed on downers. I was in intensive care. When my mother came to the hospital and said she was moving her trailer down to her land in Kentucky, and that I could go down there if I wanted to get away from it all. So I'd go about 2 miles out in the woods and desperately seek the Father, you know. I got to the point to where I really wasn't absolutely sure, you know, if God was even real, you know, and I wanted to make sure, you know. And he is. You know, he gave me visions and dreams about a worldwide miracle ministry. And the following year I took off traveling full-time with an evangelist. And these guys, they had it, you know. You're talking about miracle signs and wonders, you know. There was I saw God open hundreds of blind eyes and deaf ears, and people got healed of cancers and visions and prophecies and all this stuff, you know. And I was like, I always knew it was supposed to be that way, because it grieved me that I'd hear all these stories. You know, my grandfather had a miracle ministry back in like the 1940s and 50s, you know, and I'd hear stories about my grandpa and in the Bible, and you know, miracles from missionaries overseas. And I was like, well, how come it don't happen in our church? You know, when I was like 15 years old, a man in my church died of cancer, and it grieved me because it just seemed like everybody just expected him to die. Oh, he's got cancer, he's gonna die, you know, and he did.